I trusted her implicitly, or at least, I thought I did. Sophia and I had built a life most people could only dream of: weekends at charming bed and breakfasts, candlelit dinners at our favorite spot downtown, and long walks where our laughter seemed to echo into eternity. But trust is a fragile thing. It doesn't shatter all at once, it cracks, silently, until it crumbles into dust. For me, the first crack appeared on a humid summer evening, and it was in the form of a text message. I had just returned home from a grueling work trip, eager to surprise her with dinner. The table was set with her favorite wine, and the scent of roasted garlic filled the room. It was perfect, or it would have been. As I waited for her to come home, my eyes landed on her phone, buzzing incessantly on the counter. I glanced at it instinctively, intending to silence the notifications, but one message caught my attention: "I can't wait to see you again." Last night was perfect. It was signed with a single initial, L. My stomach twisted. It had to be a mistake. Maybe it was work-related? But why would someone text her like this? I told myself to put the phone down, to respect her privacy, but my hands betrayed me. A single tap opened an entire world I never wanted to see. Conversation stretched for weeks, inside jokes, flirty emojis, plans to meet. Each message felt like a dagger, carving into me bit by bit. When Sophia walked through the door that night, she smiled at the sight of the table. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, kissing me lightly on the cheek. Her touch, once warm and reassuring, now felt hollow. We ate in near silence, the words caught in my throat. I studied her every move, the way her fingers toyed with the stem of her glass, her distant gaze when I spoke. Everything screamed of deceit. The days that followed were torture. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed more proof, something undeniable. I began noticing things I had previously ignored: late-night phone calls she claimed were work emergencies, sudden girls' nights with no photos or follow-up stories, and a newfound obsession with her appearance. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew. The tipping point came one quiet Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry when I noticed a scarf, a deep red, silky one, folded neatly on her side of the bed. It wasn't hers. I knew every item of clothing she owned. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off with a laugh, saying it must have been left behind by a friend. Her smile was too quick, her laugh too forced. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, the weight of the truth pressing down like a boulder. I decided to confront her. But how? Every scenario I played out in my mind ended with her denying everything or twisting the blame onto me. I needed her to admit it, to see the guilt in her eyes and hear the truth from her own lips. So I waited for the perfect moment, a time when she couldn't escape. That moment came on a rainy Tuesday. She came home late, drenched from head to toe. Her shoes squeaked against the hardwood floor as she slipped inside, looking flustered but oddly serene. I sat in the living room, waiting. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She paused, one hand gripping the doorframe. "What's wrong?" I didn't mince words. "Who's ill?" Her face froze, her skin turning pale. For a fleeting second, I saw something: panic, maybe guilt, but she quickly masked it with confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her tone too defensive. I repeated myself, firmer this time. "I've seen the messages. The late-night texts. The plans to meet. Don't lie to me, Sophia. Who is L?" She faltered, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of her secrets had finally crushed her. "It's not what you think," she whispered, sinking into the nearest chair. I waited, my heart pounding, ready to hear the worst. Sophia looked at me with tear-filled eyes, as if searching for the right words to minimize the damage. "Liam," she finally said, her voice trembling. The name hit me like a slap. Liam, my oldest friend, practically a brother. The man who had stood beside me at our wedding, who toasted to our love with the kind of sincerity you couldn't fake. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't supposed to happen, she continued, her voice cracking. We never planned this. Stop, I interrupted, my tone sharp. You don't get to rationalize this. Just tell me the truth. How long? Her silence spoke louder than any words ever could. She bowed her head, her hands clutching her lap. A few months, she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. It started after your promotion, when you started traveling so much. I felt alone. The room spun. Alone. That was her justification? My mind raced back to the nights I'd stayed late at the office, working tirelessly to build a future for us. The countless sacrifices I'd made, thinking I was doing the right thing. And all the while, they had been stealing moments behind my back. I gave you everything, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I trusted you. Both of you. Sophia reached out, her fingers grazing my arm, but I pulled away. It wasn't just physical, she said, tears streaming down her face. He listened to me, made me feel seen when you were so distant. The sheer audacity of her words ignited something in me, anger, betrayal, heartbreak. So this is my fault now? I asked, my voice rising. Because I worked hard to give us a better life, that somehow gave you permission to destroy everything we built? She flinched, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel every ounce of the pain she'd caused me. Do you know what it's like to find out the two people you trusted most have been lying to you? To know every smile, every laugh, every kiss has been a facade. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Then why didn't you stop? I demanded. Why didn't you come to me and tell me how you felt? Why didn't you fight for us instead of sneaking around with him? Her silence was deafening. I stood there, staring at the woman I once loved more than anything, and realized she wasn't the person I thought she was. The Sophia I knew would have fought for our marriage. She would have been honest, even when it hurt. But this version of her? I didn't recognize her. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every corner of the house was a reminder of her betrayal. The kitchen, where we had danced late at night. The living room, where we'd spent lazy Sundays curled up on the couch. Even our bedroom felt tainted. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Meanwhile, Sophia tried to fix things in her own way. She left notes around the house, apologizing, begging me to talk. She cooked dinner, set the table, and waited only to eat alone when I didn't show. But I didn't care. I was done playing the fool. I started making plans, quietly and deliberately. I consulted a lawyer, started looking for a new place to live, and began cutting ties with the life we had built together. It wasn't easy, walking away from years of memories never is, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not after everything she had done. The final blow came when I confronted Liam. I called him to meet at a bar we'd frequented for years. When he arrived, his usual confident smirk disappeared the moment he saw my face. I know, I said, not bothering with pleasantries. About you and Sophia. He stammered, trying to deny it at first, but I wasn't in the mood for his lies. Spare me the excuses, I said, my voice ice cold. I just want to know one thing, why? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, echoing Sophia's pathetic defense. It just did. That's not an answer, I shot back. You were my best friend. How could you do this to me? I'm sorry, he said, but his words felt hollow. There was no remorse in his eyes, just discomfort at being caught. I didn't think you'd find out. His words stung more than I expected. He didn't regret the betrayal, only the fact that it had been uncovered. I stood up, tossing some cash onto the table. We're done, I said, turning to leave. I never want to see you again. As I walked out of the bar, the weight on my chest began to lift. I had cut him out of my life, just as I was preparing to do with Sophia. It was painful, yes, but it was also liberating. I was finally taking control of my own story. Returning home that night felt different. The silence of the house, once comforting, now weighed heavy. It wasn't just the betrayal that haunted me, it was the memories. Every corner of our home held echoes of a life I thought was real. But now, I saw it all differently, like a beautiful painting hiding cracks beneath the surface. Sophia was waiting for me in the living room. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes red and swollen. "We need to talk," she said softly. I didn't respond immediately, just stood there, taking in the sight of her. This woman, who had once been my partner, my confidant, now felt like a stranger. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said finally, my voice firm but calm. "I've made my decision." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw genuine regret. "Please," she begged, standing up and stepping closer. "We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." "You already did enough," I said, stepping back. "And it's not just about what you did. It's about who you've become. I don't recognize you anymore, Sophia." She reached out, but I shook my head. "No. This isn't something you can fix with apologies or promises. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." Over the next week, I finalized my departure. I found a small apartment across town, modest but comfortable, a fresh start. I packed my belongings methodically, leaving behind anything that felt too tied to the life we had shared. Sophia tried to stop me, of course. She pleaded, cried, even got angry, accusing me of giving up too easily. But I didn't waver. I was done. The day I moved out, the rain poured relentlessly, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the end of our marriage. As I loaded the last box into my car, Sophia stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. "I never wanted this," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Neither did I replied, climbing into the driver's seat. "But here we are." Driving away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, grief, relief, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. I was leaving behind the pain, the lies, and the betrayal. And for the first time in months, I felt free. In the weeks that followed, I began rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy, starting over never is, but it was necessary. I threw myself into work, not as a distraction, but as a way to reclaim my sense of purpose. I reconnected with old friends, the kind who didn't need explanations, but simply offered their support. And slowly, I began to heal. One evening, as I was unpacking a box of books in my new apartment, I came across an old photo. It was of Sophia and me, smiling brightly on our honeymoon. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, a longing for what could have been. But then I looked closer, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Even in that moment of supposed happiness, there was a distance in her eyes, a hint of the cracks that would one day break us apart. I set the photo aside, not out of anger, but as a reminder. A reminder of the lessons I had learned and the strength I had found in myself. Life wasn't about holding on to the past, it was about building a future, one choice at a time. Months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sophia and Liam had tried to make their relationship work, but it had ended as quickly as it began. There was a certain poetic justice in that, though I didn't dwell on it. Their choices no longer defined me. I had moved on. As for me, I found peace in my solitude. I wasn't rushing to fill the void or searching for someone to complete me. For the first time, I was content with who I was, scars and all. The betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also rebuilt me into someone stronger, someone who knew their worth. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. But those battles also bring the greatest rewards, clarity, resilience, and a chance to start anew. And as I stood on the balcony of my new home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving.